opportunities that technology can bring to us for teaching reading to teenagers particularly. Now, some of you may have joined a training session with me before. I can see some familiar faces, but we also have a lot of new faces. As Ms. Natalina said, from Papua we have some new schools. Also, Jogja and the surrounding areas of Jogja is a new centre. We opened up a Mentari office in Jogja, was it last year? I think the year before maybe. It's hard to remember. Pre-corona days, yes. Ms. Natalina, what year did we open in Jogja? Was it last year, yes?
Last year.
Yes. Okay, great, thank you. Yes, it gets a bit confusing to remember all of the branches that we have. And thank you also, Ms. Ocha, for introducing me today. At various points along the session, I will be asking for people to answer questions. So this is not maybe like a webinar you've attended where it's just listening to me. You'll be asked to be interactive. We do have 150 people, so we can't do things like breakout rooms or that kind of thing because it's too many people. But at many points in the training, I'll be asking questions. And if you feel like you want to answer the question, please raise your hand as Ms. Ocha gave instructions before, or you can type your answers in the chat box. At multiple stages, we'll be asking people to unmute their microphone just so we can interact, because I don't want this to be 2 hours of you just sitting there falling asleep. I want this to be interactive to show you how this can be done with a big group of students as well. So if you've attended some other bigger trainings like Cambridge or Oxford, they're very passive. This will be quite interactive today. Okay, so let's get started with today's session. Let me just share screen with you. Of course, today we're talking about integrating technology into reading. And as you can see, we're already doing this through Zoom. I'm going to share screen with you now, which will be using PowerPoint. Maybe some of you use Google Slides and Google Classroom. I'm going to switch between a few different platforms today to show you. So let's get started. And again, thank you to Asta and Oxford for supporting today's training event. I'm going to look at the popular series that we use, which are Aim High and Solutions. But really, these ideas will be adaptable for any book that you use from Mentari, especially from Oxford. They have a very similar layout. Again, please mute your microphones, but anytime, please feel free to chat in English or in Bahasa Indonesia if you're having trouble with technology or something, that you're having trouble with links or that kind of thing. But before we begin, let's start with an icebreaker, as we do with every lesson. One of the important things, this is not just for reading, but this is for any time you are teaching online. You need to be extra with your personality because the students still need to be engaged. If you talk like this for 2 hours, nobody will care, they will fall asleep. So we really need to make sure as a teacher, you remember that you are presenting. And because they cannot see you physically, you need to do more with your face, maybe with your hands, so that students will watch you. Our students, especially teenagers, grow up in such a digital world. They're watching things like TikTok, YouTube, Snapchat. It's a lot of constant visual material. So try to make your presentation style as fun and active as possible and encourage interaction. So let's start with a icebreaker. One thing I like to do to get students creative thinking and talking is to show them a picture like this. You can see on the screen there's something happening, but we don't know. There could be many different things happening. And I ask students, okay, let's brainstorm. What do you think could be happening? Now, it's important that there is not only one answer. It's creative. So any story that makes sense, you could tell students they can create anything. So for example, It could be, oh yes, this boy here, he saw a dragon, and a dragon is flying through the sky and breathing fire. Make sure students know that they can be creative. Now, Miss Ocha, we're going to ask for a few volunteers to tell me, and they can unmute their microphone when you choose them. Tell me, what do you think is happening in this photo? So if there's anybody who thinks they would like to talk, yep, raise your hand. Thank you. Pascalina, I can see, has raised her hand. Maybe we can talk to her first. She seems eager. Great, thank you.
Please, Miss Pascalina, silakan. Bisa di-unmute?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being the first volunteer. It always takes some bravery. So good job. Well done. Thank you. Yes.
Pleasure. Before I answer, I'd like to interview myself.
Please.
I'm Pascalina Spesita Alaman. I'm from Yogyakarta, and our school is Kidder Station Junior High School. Okay, I would like to say a sentence about this picture.
Great.
A movie is being made
at
the moment. That's all.
And what's the movie about? What kind of movie is it? Is it a romance? Is it a comedy? What kind of movie do you think is being made?
Comedy.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Pascalina. Anybody else? Maybe we'll ask for two more people. Two more people, please use the Zoom function to raise your hand. Ms. Pascalina is showing it's a very simple activity. It's easy to do. Don't be scared. What do you think is happening in this photo? Any other volunteers?
Apakah ada?
Again, you can be as creative as you want.
We have here Miss Sania.
Great.
Silakan, Miss.
Thank you.
Okay. Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Sania, and I am from Bandung, Global Learning Education Center in Bandung. So, what's in my brain of seeing this picture is the boy with the blue t-shirt is giving a prank to his friends.
Okay. And what do you think the prank might be?
Like, maybe the sky is lava or something, because there is a prank, because like the floor is lava, so maybe he said the sky is giving us lava, maybe.
Yeah, good, great. Yes, it's one of these challenges that you see on YouTube or you see on TikTok or something. And that's the kind of thing that teenagers will definitely bring to the classroom. So it's a good opportunity to let them talk about things, and then also as a teacher it's like, oh, I might need to research this to keep up with my teenagers. So that's great. Thank you very much, Miss Sania. Thank you. Okay, let's look at the next photo, and I'll ask a few more volunteers. Thank you. Okay, we have a different photo now, and please again, volunteers, we're looking for two people to be able to hypothesize, guess, predict what this photo will be about. This is also useful as a pre-reading activity, which I'll talk to you about later. But it's a fun way to start class, and it's really good to get some creative thinking happening. Ocha, do we have any volunteers at the moment?
At the moment, we have Miss Echi Febriani. Silahkan, Miss Echi.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi.
Hi. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I think that boy wants to surprise his sister.
Okay, great. Yes. And why do you think that?
Because, you know, children like to do that.
Yes. Great. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. We have one more person to give us some creative ideas as to what's happening. Again, it doesn't have to be real. Oh, we have two people. Great. Let's hear from both.
Okay, we have. Silakan kepada Mr. Ferliano. Silakan, sir.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hi, Todd. In my opinion, probably this boy just watched The Walking Dead episode, and then he just copied the action that the actors actually did.
Right. So he's playing zombie with his friends or his family. Good. Thank you very much. Do we have one more person? Did they still want to give us the answer?
Yeah,
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We have one more person to give us the answer. Again, it doesn't have to be real. Oh, we have two people. Great. Let's hear from both.
Hi.
Who else? Silakan. Miss Penny Ariati. Silakan, Miss. Halo? Miss Penny? Silakan bisa di-unmute dulu, Miss. Halo, Miss Penny? Silakan bisa di-unmute terlebih dahulu, Miss Penny. Okay, I think we have trouble here. Oh, okay, we already have Miss Penny. Silakan, Miss Penny.
I think this, good afternoon, Todd.
Good afternoon.
And good
Thank you
afternoon,
for joining
all.
us.
Yeah, I think this boy is catching a butterfly.
Okay, great.
Oh,
And why
that's
do you think
great.
that? What gives us some clues maybe in the back of the picture that we can guess?
Because he is using his two hands.
Good.
Butterfly has two wings, right and left sides.
Good. Excellent. And where is he?
His eyes are so focused, yeah?
Yes, yes, good.
To a point, a dot or an object.
Yes, good. And also, what is in the background that makes us think that maybe he's catching a butterfly?
In the park, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good.
With
Thank you very
lots
much.
of green leaves and grass there.
Yes. Great. Thank you.
Yeah,
so sometimes this activity with teenagers, they don't always use their creative thinking. And so sometimes we need to prompt with questions like, well, why? What can you see in the photo that might make us think that? Great. We have one more photo. So people who have raised their hand, maybe you want to talk about the next photo. Okay. What can we see here? If anybody would like to talk about this photo, what can they see? And also, I want you to explain why you think that. What can we see in the background or around the image that might give us those ideas? Okay, Ms. Ocha, could anybody want to?
We have Mr. Slamet Abidin.
Okay,
silakan,
great.
Mr. Slamet.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning.
Okay.
Hey, good afternoon, Mr. Todd.
Good afternoon.
I think the picture is the man is trying to repairing something pipe in the ground.
And why do you think that?
Because he wants to repair the pipe.
So what can you see that makes you think that?
The pipe is broken.
Yes. Great. We can see a broken pipe. We can see water. So that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Slamet. Anybody else? One more person I would like to talk about.
Yes, we have Miss Annie. Silakan,
Great.
Miss Annie.
Thank you, Ocha. Hello, Todd.
Hello.
Hi,
good
I'm
afternoon.
Annie. Hello,
Thank you,
good
Miss
afternoon.
Annie.
I'm Annie from TBI Pondok Indah.
Oh, great. Not too far away.
I think that man just dropped his valuable things such as maybe keys or mobile phones, and then he's trying to get it.
Good. What makes you think that?
That's because he's wearing boots. I don't think that pipe man wearing boots when working.
Yeah, so that's good. From what he's wearing, we think that maybe this is not his job.
Yeah.
So we can, again, point students with questions. If they don't think of this themselves, we could say, well, what's he wearing? Do you think this is his job? So therefore, it might be something like an accident that happened. Good. Again, there's no right or wrong answer, but these are great ways to get students creative thinking, because again, what's the biggest problem when it comes to writing? I don't know what to write, or I don't know what to say. So picture prompts are a great way to do this. And maybe one more person. We'll have time for one more person to.
Yes, here we have Mr. Yuda.
Okay, Mr. Yuda. Good afternoon.
Silakan, Mr. Yuda.
Thank you for volunteering.
Bisa di-unmute terlebih dahulu, Mr. Yuda. Halo, Mr. Yuda?
No?
Okay, silakan.
Oh, yes. Oh, I can hear
Can you
someone.
hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
All right. And I'm from the Runaja, Jakarta. I've been
great.
seeing you here. You're very good to talk for me, truly. Well, I guess what was happening in the picture, that the guy is trying to find something treasury, like a gold or maybe a money on the box. So he tried to find anything that is very treasury. very valuable. Probably,
Great
I
tip.
think.
Maybe he found a treasure map, or he's trying to find something fantastic. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, also in the chat box. I am looking at the chat box as well.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your input. Again, when you're teaching in a big class, we don't have time to hear from everybody individually, but you can also encourage people to look at the chat box. Okay, thank you. So let's continue. And again, we're looking today at integrating technology into reading for teenagers. Now, like myself, I'm sure that in March, your teaching world was kind of turned upside down. And my training world was as well. Because for the last 4 years, I've been working as a trainer for Mentari, but also a trainer and a teacher for many, many years before that. And I'm used to doing face-to-face lessons. And now suddenly, overnight, we need to change everything. And remember, you were once a beginner teacher, and we're kind of beginning again with a different skill. We don't have to forget everything we already know about teaching. A lot of the things are the same for teaching English, but we're going to look at ways we need to change. So I understand we are all in a very different situation that we did not expect, but let's try to make the best of it and use technology to its advantage. The content for today is looking at some tools. So basically, we'll do a very quick look at the tools that I will use, including resources from USTA and OUP, and general tools that you probably already use. We're going to then spend most of today looking at reading activity ideas. So we're going to look through the different stages of reading and activities you can do with online classes. And then finally, we'll look at tools for self-study or the flipped classroom. We kind of need to rethink the idea of what homework is now, because we don't have as much face-to-face time with our students. And so we're going to look at flipped classroom, self-study and assessment tools that we can provide you with, or other ways to do it if you're using Google platforms. Okay? So first of all, just a brief introduction. If you're not aware, if you're using any of our OUP materials, then there are solutions for online lessons. So we have iTools, which means you download it to your computer and then you can screen share. It's really beneficial if the students have their own printed copy of the book. Why? If they're looking at you on the screen and they're using different apps like quiz apps or Nearpod or something like this, they really do need the physical book, especially when it comes to reading. Can you read the text on the screen now? Yes, of course, I can zoom in, but how do I know who's reading fast, who's reading slow? So really, it's really best if iTools are obviously for the teacher, or the ebook is for the teacher, but the students have the printed copy. That means they have more control over the text. It's much easier and less preparation for the teacher as well. The solutions, again, we have iTools for edition 2, but for the new edition 3, we have the iTools as kind of an online book now. So you can get the access code from your ebook, also talk to one of our education consultants for more information about that. You can also, then it runs through the oxfordlearnersbookshelf.com. After the session, we'll send you all of the links from today. So don't worry too much about the links. I'll send you a PDF of all of the slides, and I'll send you a document with all of the links so you can easily just click on rather than trying to type very, very long links. So don't worry about that. We'll take a look at that later. You can access the link later. Okay, let's take a look though at what this Oxford Learners Bookshelf looks like, just so that you can see what's happening, just very briefly. Okay, so when you log on, it's a free account, but of course we can give you all of the codes you need to add the books for that. And again, this is really for the teacher, because it's better for the students to have the printed copy. Because if they're trying to look at the ebook, plus look at you on Zoom, plus look at the app, it's too much. Too many windows, too confusing. They really do need the printed book, but the ebook is like the iTools for edition 3. if some of you are using. And again, if any of this isn't clear, you can talk to one of our education consultants. So here, the book is live. So for example, we can do the listening.
Testing intelligence. This conversation is between a real human and a computer program called Mitsu.
We can also control here, as you see, we can make it slower. This is good if your class is having difficulty with the speed, or if your class is finding it easy, we can make the audio go faster. Let me just show you a very quick sample of that.
But the voice, we can't hear the voice actually.
Sorry?
We can't hear the voice, the audio. Not clear.
The Loebner Prize in 2013, an annual competition to find a program that can pass the Turing test. The test designed to measure artificial intelligence was invented by British mathematician Alan Turing 50 or 60 years.
Today's focus is on reading. All of the reading texts in the Oxford books have audio as well, which is really useful to get students to listen to pronunciation and also help them engage in reading. Most students find reading boring, but if they are also listening, this helps them as well. So it's a good function to use. Also on this is a voice recording system, but I'll show you how to do that with the printed book through an app so that it's a bit easier for you to then listen to and evaluate if you need to. So here is the ebook, and we'll take a look again at that later. Of course, we can zoom in to sections. We have the ability to do that. So I'm going to be using that today as well, but let's go back to our PowerPoint. That's the main thing we'll be looking at today. Okay. So often trainers ask me, what is the best tool for the job? And really, it depends on your school IT support, your students' technological capability, including what they have access to, and also it depends on the type of activity. Sometimes we want to use Zoom because it has chat rooms, so if it's a speaking focused lesson, they can break into groups. Sometimes if it's a reading focused lesson, maybe you want to use something like Nearpod, which integrates with Google Classroom, and also now Nearpod does integrate with Zoom, or you might be using just Google Drive via regular email. So I'm going to look at all of these different types of platforms today, and really they're all useful, but at different times and at different parts of the lesson. So the main part is what I'm talking about today is the activity ideas. Yes, this is what people want to see, I'm sure. So let's get started. Now, remember that the principles of teaching are still basically the same for reading, but how we do the activities will be different. So we don't need to forget everything. We're not beginner teachers again. We need to keep the methodology or the theory, but then we need to change the application or the how we do it, okay? So we don't need to begin again completely as online teachers. Now, this quote from Charles Darwin talks about how will we be successful? How will we continue? And it talks about the idea that it's not about being smart or strong or fast. It's about how you can adapt to change. So that's what we have to do as teachers now, even if we didn't expect to. So we just need to adapt our ideas. And talking about adaptability, all of the activities from today can be used with really any of an Oxford English language series, even for primary. If some of you are both primary and secondary teachers, some of the same ideas apply. So don't think, oh, this is a solutions book, I don't use solutions, so this is not useful. These activity ideas can be used with any Oxford book for English language. Now, when we talk about reading, a reading focused lesson, which is like the E section of solutions, we still have 3 stages. Like we would in a face-to-face, we're going to have 3 stages online. What are these stages? Well, pre-reading, that's before we ask students to read the text. While reading, so what do we do when they are doing the reading? And then post-reading, what will they do after? Okay, so this is the same for face-to-face as it is for online learning. In terms of the stages, how we do it, very different. So what do you think the purpose of this stage is, and what kind of activities could you do? I've got some pictures at the bottom there to help with brainstorming ideas, but would anybody like to answer these questions? If you would like to answer these questions, please raise your hand. Fantastic. Yeah, what do you think the purpose of this stage is before we read, and what kind of activities? Great, we have one. Acha, we have 1 or 2 people ready to share their answers with us.
The first one is Mr. Christiansa. Silakan,
okay,
sir.
Great.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
So, yeah, I think what we can do in the pre-reading stage is that we can pre-teach the vocabulary that will be used in during the reading, or yeah, we can like scene setting. We can set what was the theme of the reading and the characters. Yeah, probably the activities that we can do in this stage for teenagers class. We can play it like taboo game or like describing game. Yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you so much. Yes, so you touched on 2 purposes, is to pre-teach some vocabulary in the text and also to introduce them to the topic. And you thought about playing maybe a language game and also some vocabulary teaching activity ideas. Fantastic. Thank you.
Yes,
Anybody
thank
else?
you, sir.
Anybody want to add some other ideas, other...
Yes, we have Miss Pascalina again, Mr.
Okay,
Park.
great. Thank you.
Silakan, Miss Pascalina.
Thank you. In my opinion, the purpose is to prepare our students' background knowledge.
Yes,
so that
great.
we can link their background knowledge to the knowledge that we are going to give them.
Yes, fantastic. So this is, yes, part of this stage is what do they already know, the background knowledge, so we can establish some kind of context so that then they're prepared for learning. Thank you, fantastic. So here are the purposes. So the first one here is to start with engaging students in the reading. Most students don't like reading, correct? Yes. So one of the best ways to start a reading lesson, we really have to start with something fun and interesting. It could be a game, could be a video, could be some kind of strange picture like I showed at the beginning of today's session. Already you're thinking, oh, what's happening here? You're already paying attention at the beginning of a lesson. Also, the purpose of that stage is to make sure that they're all, online, can hear you, can use the microphone, that kind of technical thing. Second is talking about schema. So in our brain, psychologists say that our knowledge is stored in little places called schema. If we want to learn something new, it's better to open that schema up first so we can put in new knowledge. Psychologically or scientifically, it's good to get people thinking about something before they learn about something. Yeah. Next is pre-teaching vocabulary. And finally, what can we see in this picture? Anybody like to raise their hand and tell us what they can see in this picture? Any ideas? And how does it link to reading? Anybody? No? Okay. This is telling the future, but in terms of reading, we talk about predicting. So we ask some questions to either predict what they already know or what they think they know. So this is also a way to get them to think about their prior knowledge. Because if I just said to some students, what do you know about lions, for example, if that's the text about a lion, they'll say, oh, it's an animal. Maybe the discussion is quite short. But if I gave them a list of true-false questions and they predicted if they were true or false, and then they read, it gives a purpose and a motivation for reading. So prediction is another way to find out their pre-existing knowledge, as Ms. Pascalina said before. What is their background knowledge? Open-ended questions are sometimes not successful. If I just say, what is your background knowledge about animals? The question's too open. Instead, I think true-false questions are really good for checking background knowledge, because then they read the text and they check their answers and it gives them a reason for reading. Okay. So, all of you should have received the page samples from Solutions, yes? It is Unit 5F, it's just 2 pages and it shows the reading text. If you don't have this, could you please type in the chat box, I don't have the text. The text is too small to see on the screen. Again, this is why it's useful to have the printed book for the students. Otherwise you have to zoom in. Has everyone finished reading? Yes, no, it takes too much time. You need the students need the printed book. But you can show this, of course, on your computer with your ebook, like the iTools. And as I said before, I can't say this enough, all activities are adaptable. We just changed the topic or the language, but the activity idea is the same. And again, also, if the students have the printed book, it means the teacher needs to do less copy, paste, screenshot, all of this kind of stuff. So it's easy. It's also, they're spending so much time on a screen at the moment. To have something physical is really helpful, that they can switch between, I'm chatting with my group on Zoom, but I want to see their faces, and I can look at the book rather than having to change all of the tabs in the window. So many, many reasons why the printed book is still useful and still good for students. So let's say, for example, I want to introduce the topic. How do we introduce the topic? Pictures or video. And now online, this is so easy to add images. Yes, this is one of the benefits, that actually for a lot of things, online teaching is a bit easier. Maybe in your school, you don't have a projector, students don't have computers, and you would only use the book as your material. Now we can add lots of images and video and audio if we want to. So again, for this kind of activity, it's just a brainstorming. We could do this through breakout rooms, but again, for this class and for a short activity, breakout rooms are very time consuming. So again, I find for something like this, the best idea is to chat box. So please, everybody, now you can type your answers. It's a great way to get brainstorming happening quickly, is what can you see in these pictures? Could you all, please, if you want to, you don't have to, it's not real class, but please type your ideas in the chat box. Chat box is a great way for quick brainstorming. Okay, let me take a look at the chat box. What are people saying? Chat box, where are you? There. I'm hiding my chat box somehow. Okay. Okay. So what are people seeing here in the chat box? I can see, yes, iBot meets Skynet. Yes, the Terminator. That's what I thought as well. For those of you who have seen the Terminator videos from the movies from the 90s, I think, maybe late 80s. Artificial intelligence, future, robot brain, human tries to connect, robot, could a robot be as intelligent as a human? Lots of great answers there. So this is Zoom chat box, or even Google Meeting, if you're using Google Classroom, is a great way to encourage quick brainstorming. Okay, and now my second activity is, again, it's the follow-up to the first question. So what is AI? What do you know about it? And what are some things that you use AI for? Now, also, one of the problems that we had in a regular class is sometimes students didn't have any background knowledge, and they would say, I don't know. So now in this kind of activity, I can say, okay, everybody, you have 1 minute to Google. Then I want you to write your ideas in the chat box. So instead of some students saying, I don't know, now there is no escape. There is no excuse. You can say, okay, you have 1 minute to Google. And then now, please type your answers in the chat box. Even if they copy and paste, it's just a brainstorming activity. So I find that with technology now, it's brainstorming activities are really much more successful if you have a group of students who don't know anything about the topic. Okay, so let's take a look here. Great answers, everyone. And then after that, we've done a chat box. What do I do with my students? What I do is I select a few of them to explain their answers. So for example, I would say, okay, Miss Dini, is it Miss Dini Nureni? Miss Dini Nureni, are you there? Sorry if I'm not saying your name properly.
Yes, Miss Dini.
Are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Mr. Todd.
Great. Could you please tell us about your response? What do you mean by your answer that you typed in the chat?
I'm sorry, Miss Dini. Before that, could you please turn on the camera, please?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hello, Miss Ocha.
Hello, Miss.
That AI is became smarter than a human brain because most of the research says that human only use several % of their brain capacity, while AI developed by humans to explore it until 100%.
Yes.
Right? So that's why I say it smarter than a human brain, because most humans only use several % of their brain function.
Yeah, great, fantastic. Yes, so as you can see in a pre-reading brainstorming task, you can get students to type in the chat box with their individual answers, and then you can choose maybe 2 or 3 individual students to speak to the group. So that's how I manage a brainstorming activity if I'm not using Google Zoom breakout rooms. You could do it both ways as well if you want to, but usually I find that there's not always time to use breakout rooms for every activity. So we can do it this way. Great, thank you. There's so many great answers here. Thanks everyone. Sorry, with such a big group, I can't call on everyone to explain, but you can see how through chat box and then choosing selected students that we can get some interaction happening with brainstorming. Fantastic, thank you. Okay, now another way we can do this, I'm going to show you how to do the same activity, but through Nearpod. Some of you may or may not be familiar with Nearpod. I will send you the link later, again, with 150 people. I don't want to waste time with everyone trying to log on and figure out what's happening. I will send you the link later, but I'll show you my screen so you can see what Nearpod is, okay? And again, Nearpod integrates with Google Classroom and Zoom. So you have both of those options there. Nearpod is a platform that you can present content and do activities. It's free to use and you can create lots of different lessons. So it's not limited as much as other free apps. So for example, maybe before the class, if you can see on my screen, before the class begins, I can send them the link and they can watch the video as a introduction to the topic.
I'm sorry, Mr. Todd, the voice
Can't
is
hear the
too
audio again?
low. It's too low.
Okay.
The sound is too low.
Yeah, I think it's an issue with my headphones.
Are the products of artificial intelligence.
Can you hear that?
But why use the term artificial intelligence?
Okay.
It doesn't matter for us if we can't hear today because we're not going to watch the video. But you can link here directly to YouTube. So that means instead of giving them a YouTube link that then teenagers might go off and watch other videos, it's only the video that you want them to watch in the lesson so that they're not distracted by going off onto the internet and looking for other things. So I could send this to them before the lesson begins, or I could start this with the lesson, okay? Next, there's lots of different activity functions on Nearpod. Some are multiple choice, gap fill, matching, quiz, and one of them is also a short answer. So I can share the slides with them through an attachment here. We can see I had the slides from before with the pictures and the questions. And here, then they can type in the box. The pictures are showing robots and humans. So you could do a brainstorming activity idea like that before the lesson begins as pre-work. That's part of the flipped classroom. I'll talk more about that later. And we'll talk more about Nearpod as well. But just to show you that there is more than one way to do these activities, and depends on if you're doing it face-to-face, well, not face-to-face, online, synchronously, which is in real time, or are you doing this pre or post lesson? Okay, so I'll come back to Nearpod a bit later. Nearpod is not quite the same as Edpuzzle. Edpuzzle focuses a lot more on, I suppose, activities, but Nearpod, so this is a question from Christine, thank you. Nearpod integrates multiple platforms and it has a lot more presentation ideas. Also, with Nearpod, you can record your voice, so you can give instructions verbally. I'm going to show you how to use it also for pronunciation practice as well. You can record your audio, or you can use audio from a book. Great. Okay, let's continue. One of the benefits of something like Nearpod is that they can see the questions when you go into Zoom breakout rooms. You could do the same thing with Google Slides. That's also fine. But if you screen share with Zoom breakout rooms, you know that then students cannot see the screen. So if you want them to see the screen, then you're better to use another app, Google Classroom or Google Drive, Google Documents, Google Slides, or something like Nearpod, so they can talk but see the materials on a different screen. Great. Now let's say, for example, we want to teach some vocabulary. In the Aim High and Solutions and other OUP books, reading comes first and then vocab comes after. So we don't need to do a lot of pre-teaching vocabulary before, but maybe you want to look through the text and see if there are any other words or ideas that need some explanation before the text. And here, I've chosen 3 words. I've chosen critics, chatbot, and validity. Maybe those words are going to cause some confusion. So how am I going to do that? Again, what we need to do is the same as reading in a real class, but how we do it is changing. So I think to myself, what are some different ways we can do pre-teaching vocabulary? One is a Google race and chat box, which we'll do in just a minute. 2 is a PowerPoint presentation. 3 is an app or a platform quiz. And 4 is concept checking. We don't need to do all of these together, but I'm going to show you all of them so you know what is best for your students. I don't teach your students. I don't teach at your school. You know best. So today I'm just showing you lots and lots of ideas. In a real lesson, you don't have time to do them all. This is why 1, a flipped classroom or self-study is really good. And 2, I'm just showing you lots of ideas and you can choose the ones that are best for you. So first is what I call a Google race or a chat box. So I put the words on the screen and I ask people to say, what do these words mean? They can use the dictionary. Yes, if they're online, they can use their dictionary. And what part of speech are they? Okay, so a Google race is maybe I give points or team points or no points, it doesn't really matter, to who can give me a definition of the word and also what part of speech is it. That meaning, is it a noun, verb, adjective? Okay, so let's begin, let's try it. In the chat box, I want you to maybe choose just one of those words, choose one of them, type critics equals definition, and tell me if it's a noun, adjective, adverb. I would do this first as an example. Again, students always learn by example. So for example, I would put critics, if I could type quickly, my fingers are not working, people who evaluate or judge something. It's a noun, for example. Great, thank you, Christine. Somebody asked if Nearpod was a video editing app. No, it's not. You can link videos from YouTube, but it's not editing as such. Yep, to give a comment about someone's opinion, good, it's a verb. Criticize is the verb form, so the meaning is correct, but criticize versus critics, good. Chat box, an app for making conversation. So this way, you can get students really active in finding out the definitions of their own, of the vocabulary. Good, okay. Next. Another way to do this is to do a PowerPoint presentation. So as a teacher, you lead the teaching of the vocabulary. Again, this can get a little bit boring, so I wouldn't do this with too many words. So here we have the meaning, validity, we have the form, so validity is a noun, and we have the negative noun, adjective, verb. And verb, when you're teaching, again, say if it's regular or irregular, validate is regular, so it becomes validated. This is important because verb formation in English is a nightmare. But it's not as bad as some other European languages or Russian, forget about it. So the use is an example sentence, so how we use it, and pronunciation. Here we're looking at word stress. So if you are teaching vocabulary, there are the 4 things that we should think about teaching. Meaning is this thing that we always teach, but sometimes we also need to remember the form and the word family that it comes from. We need to look at the use. So again, using it in a different sentence to the book so they can see it in a different context. And also pronunciation. It might be word stress because we all know English likes to have irregular stress as well. Now this is one way to do it. This is a little bit boring. So how can we do that in a more interactive way for online? Again, let's look back at our Nearpod screen because Nearpod makes things a bit more interactive. And again, with Nearpod, I would share the link with students so then it records their own responses. So I'm just showing you now as a teacher, but in a real class, they would take the quiz and then you can see the results. So it is much more interactive. So here, what does the word critics mean? You can put a time on that slide, and that means everybody in the class has to finish by the maximum time. They don't see each other's screens, so there's no cheating, but they can use Google, that's fine. So you can do multiple choice questions like this. And with Nearpod, it allows them to guess until they get it right. So it's not necessarily great for assessment as such, but it is good for learning. So here, what does the word critics mean? People who support something, people analyze. Well, maybe I think it's that. It's not that. That was the wrong answer. Here, what is the meaning of validity? Okay, great. Again, we have multiple choice questions here. Now here, if I want to teach the pronunciation of a word, I can record myself, say the word, and then students have to choose the word stress. So this is really quite an interactive way to do it. Let's see if you can hear. I'll show you the link, so after this session today, you can explore this and you can hear it probably better. So, I'm not sure if you can hear that.
Todd, we can't hear your voice.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with it. Anybody hear that?
Nope, we couldn't hear anything.
Anyway, it's just me saying the word critics. Students in the real lesson will be able to play it themselves, so it will go through their own audio, not your audio. They'll play it on their own device, so they will hear it. And then
Mr. Todd, your voice is too low. I
sorry.
think you. Yeah.
Hello, sorry, yes. In the real lesson, they will play it so the audio will come through their own computer. Perhaps because this is a preview, you can't hear it properly. But again, after the session, you'll get the link and you'll be able to explore the function. So with the quiz, you can upload an image, a video, audio file, or you can record your own audio. So it's really quite multifunctional. Yes. Okay, great. So we talked about the word stress. We also talked about use. So here, I will give them a sentence and I ask them if it's used in the correct way. So is the word critics used correctly in this sentence? My teacher is very critics of her written assignments and always gives her low grades. Of course, this is no, because it should be critical. Yeah? Critical is the adjective form. So there's lots of different options. Again, I'll send you the link. You'll have time to play with it later. Okay. Great. Let's continue. So with something like an interactive app, you could do with like Nearpod. It's really an easy way to make things interactive. Another way we can help with vocabulary is by asking comprehension questions. And this I would do to the group. In the chat box, we would ask one question at a time, otherwise it's too confusing. So these would be for the word critics. So what part of speech is this? Is this singular or plural? In the chat box, you can type your answers. Just to question one. Great, critics is a noun, plural, fantastic, thank you. We know it's regular because it just has an S on the end. What is a synonym for critics? What kind of things do critics comment on? Anybody know? Great, what is a synonym for critics? Remember, it's a noun for a person, so we need to think of a synonym for a person who does this. Any ideas? What do critics comment on? A fault finder? Yes, thank you, Christine. Good. Reviewer, evaluator. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Miss Jen. A judger. Thank you, Mr. Preteaching. Thank you. Yeah, critics comment on anything, basically. Thank you, Mr. Bertram. Great. And what do critics comment on? Anybody have any ideas for that? Often we get, yeah, maybe we get text analysis. Good, yeah. Just about everything, says Chris. Thank you, Chris. Food, movies. Yeah, we get music, we get politics. Yeah, everyone wants to be a judge. So critics, unfortunately, are not in short demand or not in short supply, perhaps. Yeah. Comment on flaws. Yeah, I mean, criticism can be a good evaluative tool. Like as a teacher, we want to give feedback. But yeah, critical is kind of a negative thing. What are the adjective and verb forms? Does anybody know what the adjective and verb forms of critics are? Great, critical, thank you. That's the adjective form. He is very critical. And to criticize, yes, is the verb. Again, this kind of activity, then you might link to a Google Word document with parts of speech activities where they have to change the word critical into different parts of speech. That's great. Also, if they're doing, I find this is really good for writing, pre-writing practice. Why? Often students use the right word for meaning, but they don't use the right form because they don't analyze their sentence and think, oh, that word should be an adjective, not a verb or an adverb. And so this helps them really think about the job of each word. Every word has a job. That's a noun, so an adjective that describes the noun. So with parts of speech activities, this really improves writing, I find. And finally, how do people feel when they're criticized? Angry? Yep, wanting to throw something. Yeah. Annoyed, grateful, or upset? Yeah, depends how it's presented. Yeah, definitely. And again, if your students are not sure, you could role play criticizing. Oh, all of you students are so terrible. You're all so lazy. Okay, I was being critical. How did that make you feel? So sometimes with this kind of activity, a little bit of a role play or a demonstration can really be a way to really make them have that response that we want. Great. Okay. Also, in the book, of course, there are pre-reading tasks, okay? So again, I can copy and paste from the book, or I can use the ebook to do this. And it's a conversation. And what are the instructions here? It's read a conversation between a human and a computer at the beginning of the article. That's here. Is it obvious which is the computer and which is the human? So again, I can get students to read by themselves or read from the book. Another way to do this is to ask some volunteer students to do it. Again, depending on how much time you have, you could also ask 5 students to be A and 5 students to be B. In a real class, this works, but online, everybody's a little bit out of sync. So reading aloud is not really a good idea so much for online learning. With a group, with many people reading at the same time, it's a bit chaotic. Okay? Okay, so now in the chat box, instead of speaking, please type which A or B you think is the robot. So either type A is the robot or B is the robot. You don't need to tell me the other one. Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to ask some people. Okay. So Chris, are you there? Could you explain why you think B is the robot? If you're there and you can unmute your microphone, Chris. Chris Carruthers.
Yes, silakan Mr. Chris. Silakan di-unmute terlebih dahulu.
Okay, yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Hi, Chris.
Would you please turn on the camera too? Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so scrolling down, when you see the name being calling himself, my name is Aardvark, unless you have a very creative parents who want to give you original name,
good.
Chances are that is going to be after some type of computer program, especially when you see the dots but after each letter.
Yes, great. And you, again, if it was a, yeah. So yes, through the name Aardvark, that's not going to be someone's name. Thank you, Chris. Good. Are there any other ways in that text or clues or hints that we find that which is the robot, which is the human? I've got some people saying A is the robot. Would someone who said A is the robot like to explain why? Maybe Miss Pia. Are you there, Miss Pia? You said the robot is A. And why do you think the robot might be A, Miss Pia, if you were there? Or anybody who said A.
Miss Pia, silakan. Miss Pia bisa di-unmute terlebih dahulu, ya, dan bisa turn on the camera, please. Okay.
Yes, okay. My answer is that A is the robot.
Okay.
Because, yeah, in one part of the conversation here, we find out that A said, you don't know what you want to talk about. Humans are not too intelligent at times. I think human won't say this thing. So, yeah, in my opinion, this is the robot A.
Good, thank you, Miss Pia. Do I know you, Miss Pia? Which school are you from?
Bahwa.
Yes. Like, I know you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Tia. Great. And again, this is designed to have two separate answers. And so again, as long as in class you allow students to explain why, both opinions are valid until they read the text, and then they'll find out. Which also, if the answer is too directly, it's A or it's B, then students won't be interested in reading to find out who the robot is. Great. Okay. Great. Okay. Also, finally, before we do the reading, we can do another predictive task. The conversation with the chatbot was a predictive task. And we can also ask some other true-false statements about what they will read in the text. So again, this is a way to check their background knowledge, but also to create an interest in reading. They're motivated because they want to see if they were correct or incorrect. So true-false statements work really well for this. Do you think these statements are true-false? Now, the first thing students will say is, I don't know, mister, I don't know. And I say, well, that's okay. This is to predict. We're just going to guess. I want to know what you already think. Oh, I don't know. It's like, it's okay. We are just think about what you already know. If the answer is right or wrong, it's just a brainstorming activity. Oh, okay. So you need to make sure with the predictive tasks that they're not stressed about getting the right answer. So we have some predictive tasks. I get them to write their answers on some paper so later they can check. And then I might ask why, but we don't really need to ask so much why here because it will be explained by the text. Okay? Now, the problem is that in-depth pre-reading tasks can be time-consuming. We have already spent 1 hour looking at pre-reading tasks. That means your lesson might be over before you even begin the reading. So this is what we look at as what we call the flipped classroom. We give activities not just as homework, but pre-homework. And I think we need to change the idea of what homework is at the moment because everything's at home, yeah? So we might need to change it to this idea of self-study or preparation or practice. Preparation is before the lesson, practice is after. So we can really look at that idea of when you spend your time together, what is the most useful use of that time? That's probably discussing ideas in the text, checking things like grammar. Grammar needs sometimes a bit of face-to-face explanation sometimes. So it's up to you. You need to decide what is best with the on-camera time and what can I give them before or after the lesson. We'll talk more about that a bit later. So let's have some review questions. Pre-reading. Okay, who would like to volunteer to answer the first question? What is the aim of the pre-reading stage? What is the aim of the pre-reading stage? Anybody would like to answer that question? Raise your hand.
Okay, we have Miss Pascalina, Mr. Todd.
Great. Okay, Miss Pascalina, question 1. What are the aims of the pre-reading stage again?
Okay, thank you. From what I heard, there are 2 aims. First, to engage the students.
Yes.
And the second is to dig out their existing knowledge or their background knowledge.
Yes. Get them thinking about the topic and get them interested, definitely. And also pre-teach vocabulary if you think it's necessary. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Pascalina. Thank you. Being very active today. Thank you. What kind of activities can we use? Anybody else want to answer the question? What type of activities can you use? What did I just show you? Anybody like to do that? Or Miss Ocha, you can just choose a volunteer. Oh no, Triani.
Oh, we have Miss Triani, Mr. Todd. Okay.
If you have no volunteers, we will choose.
Hi, hello. Deals with the activities, pay attention to pictures or
yes.
giving them questions.
Uh-huh.
And then or role play.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
Yeah.
what I got.
Great, thank you. So yes, so first we can stimulate vocabulary or ideas or interest through video, through pictures, through audio. Maybe you want to play audio. There are lots of movies about AI, artificial intelligence, so maybe you play the trailer for a movie about artificial intelligence. I think Chris was saying before about the Terminator series. There's also the other series called AI about a family that I think they can't have a child, and so they have a robot child, and it's a bit dramatic and emotional, but you could just play the trailer, the video clip, and that is also a good way to interest students. We talked about teaching vocabulary, which is about the meaning, about the form, about pronunciation, about use, so we could do parts of speech activities. Actually, there are more vocabulary activities in the book later, so I wouldn't spend too much time on that. Usually the key vocabulary activities come after, but I was just showing you some vocab ideas as well. And which could be done during live lessons and which could be done for self-study. Would anybody else like to answer that question? Again, there's no right or wrong for this answer, it's a personal opinion.
Silakan. Is there anybody? Okay, no. It's Miss Triani again.
Miss Ochi, you can choose anybody at random.
Okay, I think I will choose Mr. Ezra Sutriawan. Silahkan, sir. Karena dari tadi we have female, now we have male, right?
Great.
Okay, Mr. Ezra, silahkan, sir.
First of all, we should share the same files that we have with the students, especially a-book. Of course, the students should have the printed one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and then for the homeworks or self-study, we can use what kind of app do we use?
We can use Nearpod or
Nearpod.
Google Drive,
yes,
or Google Classroom.
So that the students can use that one.
Yes, great. So really, it's up to you because you know your students. I don't know your students. Sometimes students need more help with the pre-reading, and so maybe that's when you do face-to-face time more, and they can do reading comprehension after class, or maybe they need motivation to do the actual reading, and they can do the listening because you have the audio through the ebook or the CD or the iTools. So really, it's about you making best use of your time. What do you think your students need? And kind of changing it to suit that. Great. Okay. Part 2. This is while reading. This is what we usually think of as reading lesson. That's the reading of the text. So what do we think the purpose of this stage is and what kind of activities? Again, I need some volunteers. I need one person to answer the first question and one person to answer the second question. So what is the purpose of while reading? We can see a while reading activity on the screen. We have kind of true-false statements. That's a while reading activity. What is the purpose of while reading? Anybody like to volunteer, or Ocha will choose someone?
Okay, Miss Letna Erling. Silakan, Miss.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, Miss Letna. The voice is
Just go echo.
Sorry, Miss Letna. Are you using 2 devices, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Miss Letna, you are still muted.
Oh, okay.
It's still echoing. I'm sorry. Maybe the other device you could turn it off first.
It's like at the club.
Yeah, because the school is not really equipped.
Okay, that's okay. Maybe we'll ask someone else. So you can just type in the chat box if that's easier for you. Ms. Letna, you can just type in the chat box. Are you okay now? Okay, great. Yes, anybody else want to speak to answer that? But Ms. Letna will look at your answers in the chat box.
We have Miss Lamia here answering at the chat box.
Okay, great. Okay, great.
She said it's to check students' understanding of the text.
Yes, exactly. So basically, in a general way, to understand, yes, more details of the text, to check understanding of the text, to see vocabulary and grammar in context, but it's comprehension stage. That's why we do that. So let's take a look here. So first of all, it's to practice the critical reading skills, skimming, scanning, and close reading. These are all skills needed for exams, but also we use this in real life. For example, if I'm looking at a movie schedule, I mean, we don't really do this anymore, we look at it online, but we are quickly looking for the information. We don't read the whole schedule. It's like taking a bus or a train. We don't read the whole schedule, we're just looking specifically for what we want to look at. We also strengthen reading comprehension. This is also things like genre. Even though the Ujian Nasional is changing for next year, it's still useful to remember some of those ideas of genre, guessing vocabulary from context, spelling. The more that students read, the better their spelling becomes. This study has been shown that children who read more have better spelling because they see the words. Why? English spelling is a nightmare. It is so irregular that the only way that students can really improve their spelling without doing lots of spelling activities is to read more. And also to show students an example of a text type. Maybe they're going to write something similar, or they need information from that text to do some speaking or writing, a debate, discussion, role play, writing. So they're the main purposes here. Okay, and again, the first type of activity we do is skimming. And skimming is roughly 4 to 5 questions about the text in general. So it could be text type, purpose of author in a general way, and I'll show you what I mean by that. It's different to author's opinion, which is a close reading task, about style and about topic. So for example, what genre is this text? Is it fiction or non-fiction? Is it an information report? How do you know? What is it? So all of these questions are general questions, and also were your predictions correct? We could do this as Google Chat. We could do this as asking individual students, but I'm going to show you now a different type of way to do this, which means that every student has to respond, or you can do it in groups, and it's through Google Forms, which some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with, so I don't want to bore you too much, but just in case people are not familiar with, oh, what's going on here, are not familiar with Google Forms. Google Form, of course, is integrated with Google Classroom, but if you don't use Google Classroom, you can still send students a link to their email account. And again, you'll have a link to this Google Form in the handout, so you can check it out later. So first of all, email address, of course, for students to verify it's them. Here, I put write the full names of your group members. So I'm going to organize this as a group discussion through Zoom or Google Meet, but then I have to set up individual meetings. It's very time consuming. Google Zoom breakout rooms are, Zoom breakout rooms are much easier to manage. So then I have the questions. So here they can do multiple choice. Is it fiction or non-fiction? Why? What is it about generally? What's the purpose of the author? So before, when I said, why is this a skimming question? It's really based on text type: persuade, entertain, inform, recommend. it's not identifying their opinion, which is more difficult, and that comes later. Were your predictions correct? Which ones? And here, I'll show you, actually, that's for the next task. With Google Forms, if you are not aware, you can make it into a quiz where their answers are scored. So you can look at the, so they can get a score of how they did, or you can just have open questions. It's better to use it as a quiz because then you get sent the results and you see which group are doing the work. So it's a good way to track the activities. Again, you would need to use this with Zoom or Google Meeting, but individual meetings in that room. Before I move on, does anybody here use Google Forms for this kind of activity? Would you like to tell us about why you like or don't like, if you want to? I don't work for Google. We're not here to suggest any specific apps. You can use really whatever you want. But if there's someone who would like to briefly share about what they use Google Form for. Okay, we have one person. Ocha, in the chat box, could you ask that person to unmute and discuss their answer?
Mr. Christiansa, silakan. And also,
yes.
please turn on the camera, sir. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, we've been using Google Classroom, and in that Google Classroom, we use Google Docs and Google Forms to give the student tasks and exam. So for the Google Form, usually we use for multiple choice question and for short answers. And also when we want to make a survey or a poll to the parents for evaluation, we can also use Google Form.
Yeah. So do you find it useful for this kind of thing, like a reading activity or a listening activity where there's multiple choice, short answer, true, false? Google Form is quite good, yes?
Yes, correct, because we can download the PDF file of the reading, and we can also display the pictures, and we can divide them into section, and we can give them any kind of question basically with Google Form.
Great. And do you do that as group work or do you do it as individual work?
Both, sir. Can be for group work or individual work, depend on the setting in the Google Classroom.
Yes. And do you then have different rooms in Google Classroom that they can break out into groups during a live lesson, or do you give that to them as a after the lesson group meeting task?
So usually we use Google Meet for the, if we want to have an online explanation first, then they will break up to their own groups in the Google Classroom.
Yeah, great.
Yes, great.
And so again, it's all about productive use of that teacher face-to-face time. What do they need me for? And then what can they do by themselves? Especially teenagers, especially in the older classes, they know a lot about technology and they can figure things out and they are much more prepared for independent learning. The lower the level, year 7, 8, might need a bit more face-to-face with the teacher time. Thank you so much for your sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So let's just a brief Google form. There are lots of ways to use that. And again, I'm not here for a tech talk or a Google talk. So there are lots of YouTube videos for tutorials to help you do that. But I find that Google Forms is really good when you want a response from either individuals or from a group. And you can put in multiple choice, short answer, video, PDF, all sorts of stuff. So it is, again, quite adaptable. Okay, now let's screen share again. Again, I'll send you a link to that Google form in case you are new to Google Form. So that's the skimming activities. Now we need the scanning. And what are scanning activities? Scanning activities are looking for that specific information. And usually a scanning question, the answer will be in one sentence. typically. If you look at exams like Oxford exams or Cambridge exams, for this type of question, the students will be able to locate the answer in one or maybe two. If they need to understand the whole text, that's the next type of question. But for this one, we have the true false, we have the multiple choice, we have short answer, we have gap fill or sentence completion. We might match the topics to the paragraphs, although matching topics to paragraphs is a little bit more close reading because they have to read the whole text. Again, you could do this through Nearpod, you could do this through Google Form. You can also play the audio. So if you have the iTools or the ebook, as I showed you before, while students are reading, it's very useful to play the audio so they hear the pronunciation and they get 2 points of reception. So it's not just one or the other, it strengthens their skills. These type of activities are always in the book. They always have some kind of scanning question. It's the most common question we think of, the question type, when we think of reading comprehension. But if your book has multiple choice, then why not add true false? Especially now because class time can be expanded to after video time with the teacher, that don't be afraid of adding in more questions. To get the benefit of the text in terms of grammar, language patterns, spelling, students really need to read that text at least 3 times. Often in class, because we have so much content in an Oxford book, there is so much content that we kind of try to do the reading maybe once or twice only. It's really beneficial. There are so many benefits for rereading. So if we get other activities, again, with Google Form, it's so much easier. Before, perhaps we didn't want to print copies of things or photocopy extra worksheets. Now with Google Form, Google Document, things like Nearpod, it's so easy to create, I know it sounds mean, extra work for students, but really it's there to help them. And again, it could be something optional if you don't want to burden your students with too much homework. Liberty, one problem is that your students know how to do reverse coding and can cheat on the tests. Wow, so that is quite a problem. I'm going to take a look at the LMS from Oxford and maybe that can help with that situation. So I'll talk about testing in the last session there. And again, yes, okay, thank you. I'm not a tech expert, so I'm not sure if I can be the one to help you with that problem. An example of students knowing more technology than we do. Okay, great. Now also, what if we want to do something more visual? Sometimes we want to get away from reading only as lots and lots and lots of words. For some students, it's quite confronting or confusing. And really, we want to see if they can extract information. Why? In the real world, we have Google, which has so much information on it. We need to train students to kind of find what they need and forget the rest. There's so much information, it's overwhelming. Back when I was in high school, we went to the library to research. So, you know, you'd find a couple of books and that's what you'd use. Now there's thousands and millions of websites. It's confusing and challenging. So sometimes we want to get students to be able to read a text and pull out the key information and in some kind of visual diagram or representation. Now, you can't do this on Google Form. You can't do this on Nearpod. So what are some ways that we could do this? Well, one way is to create a Google slide and you put the Venn diagram image on that and then students have to add their text. You leave it blank. So for example, here, humans and AI. Obviously, you need to explain what a Venn diagram if students don't know. And here, we're not looking for sentences, we're looking for just key vocabulary. What are the differences between humans and artificial intelligence and what do they have in common? Maybe that's not super relevant for that task because it doesn't talk so much about the differences, but a Venn diagram is an interesting concept. You could also, for different, maybe it's a narrative. If you have a narrative text, you could get them to create a timeline. You could do that again. They could create their own timeline on Google Slides, or you could do it through PowerPoint or Google Document. You set up the template and they can fill it out. So for something visual, we can use, sometimes, including myself, used to think of PowerPoint as more of a presentations tool, but actually because it's quite visual, especially with things like the smart chart, and you can put all the elements and they can move them around, or they can create their own as well. So again, it's more of a homework task, but for something visual like a chart, I find that PowerPoint or Google Slides is great. Yep, create a graphic organizer, yes, definitely. Christine, could you please tell us more about your question? So if you would like to unmute and tell us,
Christine?
Yep, Miss Christine, are you there?
Yes, silakan Miss, and also please turn on. Yes, thank you.
Yes, hello.
Hey Christine, good afternoon, how are you?
Yeah, good afternoon.
Thank you. So create a graphic organizer. Could you explain that a little bit further, please?
Well, I think because you're talking about visualize, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the students are going to be interested in doing the, these scanning activities by making the graphic organizer, you know. Maybe we as teacher, we give them an example first, and then they can follow the example, and then they can use their own creativity in making their own organizer, graphic organizer.
Yes, thank you. And so again, when we look at all of the challenges we're facing with doing online lessons, think of the things that are actually beneficial. So this is a great way to get them to use more visual, artistic, creative things. And again, as a homework task. And sometimes I give it as an optional task. So it could be 3 choices, for example, for homework. 1, create a visual, a graphic organizer. 2, create a Venn diagram. Or 3, write a paragraph summary. Some students prefer to work with text and they're confident with their English writing skills, and some a bit more visual. So giving them that choice can help us get students to review reading and language in a way that is motivating to them, because we often have a problem with motivating teenagers, yeah? So we have that choice. You can either do a summary, just a paragraph, Google document, or you can create a visual organizer, a graphic organizer, and this is the example. Or you can create a Flipgrid video presentation. For those of you who are familiar with Flipgrid, it's a video recording app where the teacher records a video giving instructions and maybe demonstrating what to do, and then students create their own video. And we'll talk more about that in the post-reading. But yeah, thank you so much. Okay, great. Now, we're up to the 3rd stage of reading. And again, you may not have time to do this part in class face-to-face. Or maybe this is the part you want to focus on. You need to choose what your students are good at. If you have quite advanced students, you don't need to spend a lot of time on skimming and scanning. This is the part I would spend more time on. If you're looking at beginner students or elementary, like year 7, 8, beginning English, we need to spend more time on skimming and scanning, and maybe we don't have time for this because it's too high for their level. So it could be things like author's opinions, choice of language. In the text sample, I'm going to put the text up in just a minute. There is one question that is a close reading question. Does anybody know which question it is? Let me show you again on the... I'm just going to share my... No, that's the wrong screen. Okay, let's go back into here and see my... So if you have the copy of this, you can look, but also here, this is a close-up. Is question 3, 4, or 5 a close reading question? Question 3, 4, or 5 we can see on the screen. Which one of these is a close reading question? You type in the chat box.
We have Miss Bertrand. answering question
Okay,
5.
great. Okay, Bertram, are you there? Would you like to explain why you think it's question 5?
Silakan.
Yeah.
And also,
Yeah,
please
sorry
turn on
about
the
that.
camera, please.
Okay, Mr. Bertram.
Okay.
Sure. Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, I think it's question 5 because obviously the question in itself already asks about the writer of the text in itself.
Yes.
So basically he's not asking anything about the contents of the text in itself, but rather more on, if you look at the selection, it asks about his opinions.
Yes.
A lot of it is about opinions, about personal views, and you will not be able to get that if you don't read the whole thing and understand the whole thing completely.
Yes, exactly. It requires comprehension from beginning to end to identify the writer's opinion.
Yeah.
It's like the subtext, basically, which is very challenging. Also, it's the last question. You know, we always look at questions in order of difficulty. This is also including exams like Oxford and Cambridge exams. They always increase in difficulty. But yes, the other ones are basically factual information that they can find directly from the text. Questions 3 and 4. Very factual. It's about numbers, figures, dates, names of things. They're very scanning-based questions. But question 5, of course, is definitely that more complex question. And this is something that students have more difficulty with. So again, whenever we're doing this question, I spend time on this and I say to my students, okay, where in the text, where are some sentences or comments that help give you this answer? Because it's not just from one sentence. And this is something that some students find very difficult to do. This level book, sorry, is intermediate. So that's about level 4. So this is about grade 10. Maybe some of you are using in grade 9, depending on the level of your school in terms of the English program. But that definitely requires some literary analysis. So it's almost like first language questions. So what about some extra activities? What can we do? Because often, as we see here, there's just one question, but we want students to really closer read more. So what are some other types of questions that they can use? So as you'll see here, I have some suggestions. Yes, so here are some of my suggestions that you can see on the screen. So let's, so we might ask them to complete or make a summary. We might ask them to guess the meaning of some new vocabulary, because that understands, they need to understand the sentences around that word, particularly useful as an exam skill. Extended comprehension questions. So those we might have as open answer or short answer questions where it's not just true, false. And activities to work with the key language. That's grammar, vocab, and they're usually in the book. So we don't have to create those ourselves. Does anybody have any other ideas for close reading activities? If anybody would like to type in the chat box or raise their hand if they have any other. These are activities that require understanding of the whole text from top to bottom, start to finish. Do we have anybody raising their hands, Ms. Acha?
Not yet, Mr. Todd.
No?
Silakan, Bapak Ibu.
If not, we may choose a victim. Or we can move on probably just because of time. Actually, because of time, we have someone in the chat box. Just quickly, we'll comment. Yes, it could be like, what's the theme? For this part, you could do things like agree or disagree statements like we would do for a speaking debate. So for example, artificial intelligence is dangerous, agree or disagree. It's not necessarily something that's always directly in the text. It could be built on from that, which is the correct paragraph to follow the last. Yes, so you could reorder the text. There's lots of things like that. Okay, let's quickly review this stage before we get to the last stage for today. Yes, we're running out of time. Okay, so again, I'll quickly review this part. just for time. So the aim is to practice reading comprehension, to strengthen vocab, grammar, spelling, to get content for speaking or writing. And again, depending on your students, you know if this is best done face-to-face or best done before or after class. Okay, let's take a look now at post-reading. So post-reading, what do we think post-reading could be? We have some pictures there, just in the chat box. We don't have time to call on anybody. I just realized what time it was. Yes, true, false, not given is also good for reading comprehension. So here, for post-reading, we give, that's writing. That's like a little typing here. So writing or it's speaking. Okay, that's what we look at after the text. So this is things like a survey, role play, debate, discussion, interview, planning, problem solving, presentation. Presentations are something actually now that's better with online because they can record the presentation and send it to me so we don't have to sit through 30 classroom presentations that bore everybody to tears. They can submit that as a video and we can have time to assess, to rewatch, assess, give feedback. So in class, I would never do a presentation. It takes up too much time and many students are not doing anything, but doing a presentation that's a video recording is a really great way to do an assessment task for speaking. We have options for this. We have Google Meet, we have Zoom, breakout rooms. Again, depending on what it is and what platform you use, you know the best option for yourself. But let's take a look at a few of these in a bit more detail. A survey, how would you do a survey? Of course, we know what a survey is. This is a common, simple speaking task. But how? That's a little question mark here. How? That's the question we're all asking ourselves now. What is the best way to do it? Do we think Zoom breakout rooms? Do we think they'll do this after the face-to-face session and they can call each other on WhatsApp video, for example? Or you choose a group captain to set up a Google Meet and they have their own Google meeting, which then you can ask them to record and send to you. So there's lots of different ways to get them to do speaking. Don't think that, oh, okay, we can't do speaking anymore. We can't do group work. Get them to record after class, after class time, and submit that to you. In the chat box, we have a comment. What do we have here? Ask them to put the questions on Google Form. Yes, definitely. But then definitely they can put the questions on Google Form, but then how are they going to actually speak to each other? Do you want this as pair work, group work, Zoom, Google Classroom? They can set up their own Google Meet. Especially teenagers should be able to do this by now. And I would ask them to record and send it to you. Maybe you don't have time to watch it all, but by telling them that recording and sending it, it shows them that, oh, we need to do this task. It's not just, oh, do it and the teacher will never check. Get them to record gives them that good pressure to do it properly. And also, if you're worried about certain students and you know some students are weaker, you can focus on watching those videos. Or you can do it in real time through Google Zoom. Zoom breakout rooms. Yes. Next. Again, we have speaking activities from the book, especially for these solutions and aim high books. They're often discussion-based questions. And again, how do you want them to do it? It is, there's lots of different apps. It depends on what you want the purpose of this to be. So somebody here, Benjamin, said ask them to do it as pair work and send them to summarize their understanding using Powtoon. Benjamin, could you please tell us briefly what Powtoon is? Because I'm not familiar with that. That maybe other people are not familiar with that as well. So Benjamin, are you there?
Hello, Mr. Benjamin? Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
Okay, thank you. So Powtoon is actually an animation website. So students actually can can make their own animation using the site.
Great,
So,
and they can record their voice.
Yeah, they also can record their voice. So there are two parts in Powtoon. You can log in as teacher or you can also log in as student.
Mm-hmm.
Your students can find plenty of templates.
Great.
Inside the Powtoon, so they can choose any kind of templates that they want to use.
Great. And so this is a great, very easily targeted or reduced project, which doesn't take up too much time. And also what I really like about online teaching is that we have these options available. What I like to do is say, okay, you need to do this speaking task. What app would you like to use? Check with me first. And then maybe some do Flipgrid, maybe some do Google Meet, record, or you can just tell them which one to use. But for upper levels, especially year 10, 11, 12, I like to give them some choice. Thank you, Mr. Benjamin. Thank you.
Okay.
Again, here's just some speaking ideas for what we just did that you could set up with your students here. So here is an interview with the author. That's always something you can do with the text, and they have to create their own questions and use the information from the text to answer. Another speaking task is a planning task where they have to make a decision. So this is kind of like a problem-solving activity where you give them a situation that the school wants to use AI to improve the school and help students. They have to discuss the different ways that AI could be used and then decide on the best idea and then present it to the group. And again, that could be done, preparation could be done as homework, but presentation could be done live. So they're all listening to each other's presentations. Again, and the other part of post-reading is writing. So we could either do speaking or writing or both if you have time. Again, writing now can be more interactive because they could have a live conversation on a Google document where they're asking and answering each other's questions like a conversation but written. They could write questions for a partner to answer about the text. So before when I said the teacher can add more comprehension questions, well, students can also do that. They need to write a text of a different genre. So for example, it's the same idea, but I said to them, okay, I want you to write a short story about that chatbot competition or using an idea from the text. Some students need more guidance than this. Another is an opinion piece about the issues of the text. Do you think machines will take over the world? And if anyone's watched the Terminator series, as I think I mentioned before, Chris was talking about, that yes, there are lots of apocalyptic films about artificial intelligence taking over the world. So they could write an opinion piece about that. And also, after a text like this, reflective writing. What do you think about the text? So it's a very open-ended question. For higher levels, this could be useful. For lower levels, it's a little bit too open. Lower levels, give them more specific tasks. Otherwise, they will be confused and they don't know really what to write. But a complete writing task comes at the end of the unit. So this task can be quite short. I think it's really important to build students' writing strength, like going to the gym. We don't always want to give a long writing as a task. Sometimes just get them to practice, okay, write the beginning to a narrative, just the first paragraph. They don't have to finish the story. It just gets them practicing writing in small amounts, so when it comes to bigger amounts, they're not so stressed. So it's like, okay, I want you to write 150 words about, do you think machines will take over the world? The bigger task comes later in the unit. So just get them to, strengthen their writing skills in short ways first. So again, what are the best apps for doing writing? Again, depends on your students. I like giving some collaboration potential for writing. They could organize their own Zoom meeting or Google meeting, or that you could give them time to brainstorm, and they can plan together, and they can, if you have a Google Classroom folder, they can read each other's writing and comment privately to each other, send an email to each other about the writing as well. So this session isn't about writing, but just to give you some ideas there. Okay, let's quickly look at the last section here because we're running out of time. Again, does Aim High or any Oxford follow the same layout as solutions? Yes. So all of these activity ideas, reading is reading, no matter what book it's in, that you should always have pre-reading, while reading, post-reading. The book has a lot of while reading tasks, and often it has some post-reading tasks, but you may need to supplement. I think it's really important to do a good pre-reading task because it gets them interested and motivated. Things like, as I said, funny pictures, movie trailers, sound that maybe is a little bit strange, something that gets their interest. Finally, we're looking at tools for self-study and self-evaluation. Again, if you're looking at a learner management system, Oxford provides a learner management system that accompanies their titles. So here, if we're looking at a flipped classroom. Now, a flipped classroom we talk about as what do students do before and after, and during is when they apply the concepts with feedback. Again, a flipped classroom with a digital classroom, there are some kind of crossovers there. We don't have time to do everything in class generally, correct? And we always run out of time, especially if you're using an Oxford book. It is so heavily packed with great content that there's hardly enough time to do everything properly. So we can use this opportunity to get students used to the flipped classroom. So when we go back to class next year, they're used to doing more self-study. And I think we should rebrand homework as self-study because this means it could be before or after, and that it doesn't really finish. It's this wave that continues. But anyway, I think the idea of homework is a little bit outdated. We can just call it now self-study, perhaps. Or before we could say preparation, and after practice. So depending on what psychology you want to use with your students, because homework has such an emotion. Oh, homework. But self-study, especially teenagers who want to be more independent, it can be a way to kind of trick them into doing more homework. Why is it useful? Again, you can focus as a teacher on what you need to do together, and the things like grammar exercises, the things like writing can be done after class, so it doesn't take up class time. Also, if we're looking at a flipped classroom in terms of Bloom's taxonomy, what does Bloom's taxonomy tell us? It's about the thinking skills. Really, we want to get to the bottom. Often in class, we can spend too much time on the remembering and understanding. That's teaching vocabulary, teaching grammar. Instead, if they already do the preparation work in class, you can see how they apply and they analyze information like text and apply things like grammar rules and parts of speech and pronunciation that you're teaching them, that kind of thing. And then after class, they can do the writing particularly, which is the creating, and evaluating. We talked about evaluating as, again, that could be a writing task as either agreeing or disagreeing with something that's in the reading. Let's take a quick look though at the Oxford LMS just to give you a very quick tour. We don't have much time. And then there'll be time for Q&A very soon. So let's take a look here. Yes, okay. So again, if you look at the Oxford LMS, this means all of the materials, extra practice, audio, video, extra content is done for you. So it is a great time saver. If you find that you are spending way too much time making Google Forms, making Nearpod, making all of this stuff, the practice kit for Solutions, 3rd edition, plus they have the other titles as well, English File, Aim High. Again, this will just be a quick introduction. You set up your class like you would do for a Google Classroom, and then you can assign work. So we did vocabulary for technology. I might look at the activity for practice 3. I can assign that via email, so they don't have to do everything, just what I send them. It's self-correcting. The teacher gets reports for their scores, so you can also use this as an assessment task if you wish. So here we had the vocabulary from that unit, and it's a gap fill, but again, self-corrected, can be used as an assessment tool. There's extra, all of the unit tests and the extra tests can also be taken here. So if somebody had issues with backcoding through Google Form with students cheating, this might be a solution. Again, I don't know much about that level of technology, so don't ask me. So there's lots of great tools that we can find in the LMS if you've ever used a LMS before. It has the content, but it has extended content, extended practice, self-correcting. Again, you can use it for assessment. It has video, audio. It has writing as well that's somewhat self-corrected. And you can set deadlines for work. You can change the order of things. It's really quite flexible. The good thing about it is that it really cuts down preparation time for the teacher. Why? It's all there. You don't have to create an extra interactive form on Google or an extra activity on Nearpod or an extra slide for this or that. Again, this is really good for the flipped classroom, meaning before or after, or for assessment, then this can be used. Yeah. Because we don't have much time, just to give you a quick view, I think that I've talked about that enough. It's a really, really great platform to use. And that, yes. As Liberty said here, if Oxford has its own platform, then there's less chance of student hacking and reverse coding. Yeah, Google Forms especially is a bit more open. So if you have some very smart IT students, this could be the solution that you're looking for. Also, Oxford has a separate site that is a testing site that is not materials from the book as such, but it's general testing, kind of like the Cambridge exams. I don't have time to look at that today, but again, I think I'm going to send you a link for that in the handout. It's very easy to find. Okay, let's get back to what I seem to finish off before we as I said before, but if you don't use the LMS system, as we looked at what I did with you with the live lesson, you can also assign this for homework. And I'll send you the links to the stuff I've done as well. For further practice, there is a free student website for the solutions, and the Aim High is currently undergoing renovation. They're changing the Flash player. Now, teachers cannot check their students' work through this. So this is really a self-guided activity, or teachers could look at this for extra ideas because the content is based on the books, but it's not exactly the same. Things like grammar practice, vocab practice, things like this, yeah, common activities, but this is not linked to an LMS, so the teacher cannot get the results. This is really just for individual practice. Also, don't forget about the Oxford Teachers Club. The Oxford Teachers Club, as you can see here, has teacher site for some of the books. Aim High is under construction. It's being renovated or updated for the new edition, I think. So you need to create an account, but it's free. So you can log in there, the Oxford Teachers Club, lots of, and then you see here, the Learning Resources Bank as well. And finally, don't forget about the Global English Teachers blog that has information about it's mostly academic. So it has things like, for example, ways to engage students online, face-to-face too. There's lots of articles about teaching online. They're mainly theoretical, so it's not going to give you lots of great activity ideas, but they do have also a site that you can find out about their upcoming training events as well. They have like some free webinars as well, so through that site as well. Okay. Finally, if you have any more questions about any of the digital components, upcoming training events from Mentari Teachers Academy, from ASTA, or from our curriculum and training department, or you're interested in in-house training where we come to your school and develop programs, it's still online at this stage, but we can develop a program for your school specifically, then please talk to one of our education consultant teams. Speaking of which, Ms. Ocha, I'll hand it over to you. It's time for Q&A. Yes?
Okay, Mr. Todd. Firstly, thank you very much, Mr. Todd, for a wonderful and informative session about the technology we could use for reading activities. But before we are going to the Q&A session, please let me summarize some important things. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, sebelum kita masuk ke sesi tanya jawab ya, saya akan sedikit merangkum pemaparan dari Mr. Todd Cordy tadi. Bapak Ibu pendidik, kami sangat berharap semoga sesi siang hari ini dapat memberikan insights dan tentunya strategi baru bagi Bapak Ibu guru dan tentunya bisa menjadi jawaban untuk pengajaran bahasa Inggris yang impactful pada institusi sekolah ataupun lembaga kursus khususnya di kondisi saat ini dan khususnya untuk reading activities ya Bapak Ibu. Dan program unggulan yang sudah disebutkan tadi oleh Mr. Todd dari Oxford University Press yaitu Solutions dan M-High merupakan program fully digital yang terdiri dari textbook dan juga online practice yang mengacu pada Common European Framework of Reference serta telah dilengkapi dengan beragam kegiatan latihan edukatif untuk mengasah kemampuan bahasa Inggris anak didik Anda sehingga tentunya sangat sesuai untuk menjadi materi pegangan bagi para guru dan siswa dalam mendukung program pembelajaran jarak jauh untuk sekolah ataupun lembaga kursus. Dan dengan fitur yang lengkap Bapak Ibu guru dapat dengan mudah memberikan tugas dan latihan tambahan dan pastinya akan sangat terbantu ya untuk memonitor progres dan perkembangan setiap siswa dalam proses pembelajaran jarak jauh ini. Bapak Ibu yang tertarik menggunakan program yang telah dipresentasikan oleh Mr. Todd Cordy hari ini, khususnya untuk dua pilihan program judul tadi ya, Solutions dan M-High yang dapat mendukung lembaga kursus dan institusi sekolah, Bapak dan Ibu semuanya silakan menghubungi Education Consultant dari Mentari Group atau dapat juga menghubungi nomor WhatsApp kami dan juga email yang telah tertera di layar Bapak Ibu. Silakan Bapak Ibu bisa mencatat terlebih dahulu apabila tertarik menggunakan program kami, ingin bertanya mengenai hal ini silahkan bisa menghubungi Education Consultant dari Mentari Group atau menghubungi email maupun WhatsApp number kami. Silakan Bapak Ibu. Ya, thank you very much. Sudah dicatat ya. Sekarang kita masuk ke sesi tanya jawab Bapak Ibu. Silakan. Apabila Bapak Ibu ada pertanyaan, bisa menggunakan fitur raise hand ya, atau mungkin di chat box. Mr. Todd here, we already have one question from Mr. Krisdiansah. Silakan, Mr. Krisdiansah. Bisa di-unmute? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, I would like to ask about the solution and the aim high. I've used solution, but aim high is I'm not really familiar with aim high. So our school is basically for junior high. We are pursuing for the IGCSE first language of English exam. Will this book be supportive to support the Cambridge curriculum for the first language, or is it for the second language?
It's kind of a bridging gap So
I see.
we find that it's much higher level than an ESL book because of the intensity of content. There's so much language practice, you know, each page has so much content. And then it does start to kind of move towards the levels of first language, because it definitely helps them focus on reading and writing skills. As you see in those books, there's not a lot of speaking activities like we would have in a lower level ESL class.
Yes.
So we are looking at a lot of reading and text analysis, and we are looking at extended writing tasks. So yes, I think it's a good bridge for students who are not quite at native speaker level, but who are higher than basic English. So I think it's the right program for you. If you want to know about the differences between Aim High and Solutions, then please talk to one of our education consultants. They'll be able to explain it to you in more detail.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
There's some questions in the chat box. Miss Penny asked, in what situation could we use translation? And I'm not quite sure about that question. So Miss Penny, are you there? Could you please explain your question a bit more?
Silakan Miss Penny, bisa di-unmute dan juga nyalakan videonya ya. Silakan. Hello, Miss Penny?
Or even Mr. Martinez, because he has a similar question about translation.
Silakan. Mungkin Mr. Martinez bisa di-unmute juga ya, Sir? Oke, silakan Mr. Martinez. Hello? I think we
Mr. Martinez says his mic is broken. So I'm going to answer the question as kind of what I think you're asking. So in terms of translation of a whole text, depends. If you're at university level and your major is translation, then I think that's a very useful tool, because if your training part of the university degree is translation, then maybe. But for general ESL learners, oh God, it just takes too much time. I would say translation perhaps for some expressions like idioms that don't translate, perhaps finding the idiom that matches in English, even though the actual words will be different. Perhaps that's okay. Perhaps it's okay to translate grammatical ideas, but even grammatical ideas don't necessarily exist in Indonesian the same as English. So I really think that a whole text translation, unless you are at university level training to be a translator, I don't think it's useful. Even if students don't understand every word, we're building their reading skills. When I started reading English at the age of 3 or 4, whenever children start reading, the same as you started reading Indonesian, we don't understand every word. But we get there. So it's a process. Don't feel like with a beginner student, you have to start at level 3 and then expect translation because they don't understand. Keep it simple and don't translate lots of text. Maybe phrases, maybe words, maybe some ideas, but English and Indonesian are so different that it's like you're using, using one language to explain another doesn't really work like that because they're too different. So hopefully that explains your translation idea. Again, it's your class, it's your time, you know what to do, but unless it's academic translation, I wouldn't bother. Next. What about any iTools or other technology for on-course IELTS book? Can one of our education consultants follow up with that question there? It's from Teresia. It's about some of the, so maybe Pat Vincent, are you there? Or Bunat, if you're there, maybe you can answer that question. Okay, in the text box, chat box. From Miss Leah. Now you're asking about approaching a challenging text. Do we start with vocabulary or reading the whole text and go through vocabulary later? Again, it is really, you know, English teaching has many different approaches. I would probably do, if there's a lot of new vocabulary, maybe pre-teach half of the new vocabulary and then with the other half of the new vocabulary, see if they can guess the meaning from context. So you're getting 2 different types. Depends on how many words you have. If it's just 5 words, then you can do it before. But you said very challenging, so perhaps I would do some pre-teaching and some see if they can get the meaning from context. So you're getting both of those skills there. So thank you, Miss Leah. And again, break down the text, divide it into paragraphs so it's not like, whoa, this is too much to deal with. Do comprehension questions after each paragraph. I thank you, Miss Pascalina. Thank you, and thank you for being so interactive today. Okay, now Mr. Plasetio is asking about primary. Some say it's a Mars language. Yes, today was a secondary session. If you're wanting to look at our primary session, that's next week. So Mr. Plasetio, yes, today was specifically for teens. It was not for primary. So please join our session next week. Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else? I think that's all
Maybe
the questions
that's
we have
all.
time for. Yeah. Great.
Okay. Thank
And
you
again-
very much, Mr. Todd.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for those who were brave and shared their responses. Again, with a big class, I didn't get to speak to everyone, but I look forward to joining you again. Again, for primary teachers, that's next week. And again, look at our full schedule of training events coming up in the the rest of this year, basically. So thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Todd Cordy. And hopefully by this session, the participants are also enlightened and also have our mind refreshed, especially for integrating technology in reading activities for teenagers. And for those who would like to join the next session, it's about for the primary learners. You can join for the next week, the next session. It will be, you can register in at www.hadiru.id. And dear educators, for those who would like to download today's materials, you can access it through the link displayed on the screen. Silakan Bapak Ibu, apabila ingin mendownload atau mengunduh materi hari ini, silakan bisa mengunduh dari link yang sudah ada di layar ya Bapak Ibu, dan juga akan ada di chat box. Silahkan bisa dicatat terlebih dahulu, sehingga nanti bisa mengunduhnya ya Bapak Ibu. Oke, sudah dicatat ya. Baik, terima kasih. And now I'm going to share the information about e-certificate. Bapak Ibu, please kindly spend 3 minutes to fill in our feedback online form. The link and the QR code are displayed on the screen. This is important. Bapak Ibu, please access the online form and make sure to fill it very carefully, especially on your full name and active email address. This data will be used for your e-certificate. You will have your certificate delivered to your email only after you submit the feedback form. Silakan Bapak Ibu untuk mengisi feedback form online ini dengan sudah tertera di layar Anda dan harap diperhatikan ketika penulisan nama dan juga email aktif Anda karena data ini akan digunakan untuk penulisan di sertifikat elektronik. Dan sertifikat elektronik ini akan terkirim ke email Anda hanya setelah Anda submit feedback form. Silakan Bapak Ibu bisa mengisi sekarang.